Welcome back. When you're here, I'm assuming that means that you have your pieces all cut, labeled, and you're ready to start block one. So there's a couple things here on this video. We're going to be doing some strip piecing. We're going to be doing some subcutting and then putting the block together. The block that we're putting together, you can see behind me. This first one is for my short, and there's my dark, the one that I was a little concerned about with the dark background, but we'll see what happens. It's actually, I'm kind of liking it. And I think it'll look great when I put in that floral fabric for the stars. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about strip piecing. I know we have some new quilters in here with us today. Strip piecing is basically when you're going to take some pieces, some units, you're going to leave the piece whole, usually the width of the fabric, sometimes not. As you remember in the cutting, one of the things we're doing is we're cutting a couple strips whole and then another strip to go with it. We cut it in half, so it's only about 21. We're going to be sewing those together into a unit that's something like this. Then you're going to subcut this unit or cut this into smaller units. Now there's a couple things when you do with a fabric or strip piecing. I typically do not trim my selvage edges off when I am cutting, when I'm doing the strip sets. And the reason for that is because I'm going to have to clean it up anyway. And I feel like if I cut them off and then I'm going to subcut, that I might lose some and enough that I'm going to get one less unit. So what this means is we're going to sew these together. We're going to cut them down into the smaller pieces. They're going to be used in here. As a matter of fact, this strip is going to be cut into 2-inch segments that we're going to be using for the 4-patch units. So one of the things that's really important is your 1/4-inch seam allowance. So what I would like you to do before you start is take a practice run here on your 1/4-inch seam allowance. Take a scrap of fabric that's 2 inches long and another, or 2 inches wide, and another piece, say 2 by 3, and then another piece that's the same size. Put them together, sew them together with your 1/4 inch, press them. This is pressed in one direction. The instructions give you pressing directions. We're going to talk about that in a second. And see if your unit now measures 3.5. Because what's going to happen is this 2-inch strip and this 2-inch strip, you're going to lose your 1/4-inch seam allowance from both, so you're actually going to get a piece that should be 3.5 inches. So if it's not, adjust, meaning make your stitch length a little bit bigger or smaller, or your stitch seam allowance a little bit bigger or smaller as needed, and somehow mark that on your machine so that you know what's accurate. That's going to be a key role to making all of this go together properly. So I mentioned pressing just a minute ago. I include pressing suggestions. If you want to press everything open, you are welcome to do so. Now, I've put everything in here based on what typically goes together and nests well when you're sewing them together. There will be a spot in which it's not going to work, and you're going to have to make an adjustment. I'm going to show you that in a little bit. So in the pattern, the arrows that are provided with the diagrams show you the pressing piece. Okay, so when we cut strip sets, like this one, okay, this is your accent 1, your accent 2, you're going to see the seam allowance here. See the direction it's going down here toward the dark, which is your 2. What I like to do is put my ruler on it so that when I'm cutting, the rotary cutter is going to be going in the same direction that the seam allowance is. Does that make sense? It's going to be going up. Because if you're cutting this direction, now you're going to be right sides up. But if you're cutting to where the seam allowance is open, it sometimes, especially if you have a little nick in your blade, sometimes what happens is it catches and you don't get a perfect cut. So what you're going to do when you're cutting this, you've got your strip, you've done your cleanup edge, and you're going to be cutting this, say, a 2-inch segment. So you're going to find the 2-inch mark on your ruler. This isn't going to be exact or easy for you to see. The 2-inch line and then you're going to be cutting over here. Now, not only do you need to worry about the 2 inch this way, you need to make sure you're accurate here with your 3.5. So your seam should be on a straight line of your ruler. So you want to check that. If it's not, you might need to make a cleanup cut or make an adjustment or take out even some seam and cut that. So you're going to cut your strip set into pieces that look like this. Aren't those cute? So what's going to happen, and I'm going to need my glasses, you're going to be cutting those, and then after you've cut those, you're going to, on the second page, it talks about the making the 4-patch units. And so what's important is that you are looking at the 4-patch unit, and you're going to make it according to the sketch. You're going to have them like this. And when that happens, the seam allowances will butt up or nest. They kiss. There's all kinds of words for that. One's going this way, one's going that way. And that makes it really nice to get a very, very nice center seam. So you can pin this. If you trust yourself, you don't have to pin it. You can just sew, but sometimes what I find when I do that, it tends to separate a little bit there in the center, and I'm not very happy with that because you want it to be a beautiful little 4-patch like this. So there's a product that I really do like to use. It's called Seam-Align glue. This is great. Dawn has this in the shop. I've been demoing this for like a year now. It's a temporary adhesive, and you're going to put little dots on the seam. You're going to set it with heat, and then you're going to sew. No need for pins, nothing. If you've put it together and you've accidentally put the wrong sides together, you simply take it apart. There's no residue left. It's not wet. It's not stiff. You simply reapply and reheat. Now I'm going to show, because right now it's a little hard to do here, I'm going to put a quick video on how to use this and something else we're going to talk about later, which is the Easy Press solution. These, you can get them individually, but it comes, there's a starter pack that includes the 1 ounce of glue, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it takes just the tiniest of drops. And then this pen, which comes empty, and it comes with a 4-ounce container. I believe it's 4-ounce container of this solution that I'll mention later. But I like to use that Seam-Align because then the pins, for me, a lot of times when I go to take them out, there's distortion. So there'll be a closer up video of that. If you've used it, you'll understand exactly what I mean. So this is our goal. In the instructions, I tell you after you sew this, that you want to spin the seams. Now, spin the seams means that you are not going to press this in one direction, okay? You're not going to do that because you get a pretty hefty bulk here. So instead of just opening the seam up and sewing it, or opening it entirely to where it's going to look like that, can you see that? Instead of that, you're going to get this look where it's spinning the seams and it's creating another little 4-patch here. So this seam allowance is going up, that's going over, down, and around. That's the spinning of the twisting. Now, how do you do that? A lot of people I've heard, and this is how I was first taught to do it. You come into the seam allowance. I have to put my glasses on for this. That would be dangerous, which is the reason I don't like to do this. Take your seam allowance, your seam ripper, and you have to rip out the stitches that are here in the seam allowance. Well, this is a sharp, pointy object, and I've been known to rip fabric. So I learned how to do the twist. Not the dance, but although I don't mind doing that. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Simple, quick, and very easy. What you're going to do is you're simply going to take your piece, you're going to pinch. So where your fingers are not, can you see that? Are not touching the seam allowance. If you're on the seam allowance, you can't twist. So you're going to be pinching. See where the fingers are? There and there. And then you're going to simply twist. Watch. Did you hear it? It pops open. Those seams, you only have a couple stitches in there. So now it's open like this. What I do is I finger press this from the back to get that, and then I press from the front. You can press from the back, but what I find happens for me is when I press from the back, I get a little fold in these areas. So I just do a quick finger press and press from the front. This is where the Easy Press solution comes in. Sometimes there's still a little bit of a bulk, but this has a little nub of gel in it, which you'll do. And again, I'll show you a closer up of this. You're going to just put this on here and iron it, press it, and it's going to be beautifully flat. So I'll have that demo here in just a little bit. So you're going to make the required number of 4 patches. Now, when we're doing these 4 patches, when you're doing the subcutting, you actually have a longer piece. You need 1 full strip set plus more. I had you cut a half. I think in this small one, you probably could have done only a quarter, but I just go ahead and do the half because you're safer to do that in case you need to clean up your cuts more frequently, or in case you have something that looks like this. I'm not happy with that center at all. So instead of taking it out, and you could see I should have known from there, look at the 2 ends, they're not lined up at all. I should have known that, and I should have felt it when I'm sewing. That's something to be aware of when you're sewing. If you feel a distance, a space between the 2 seams, then it's come apart. If you feel that it's really thick, and you hear that, especially when you're sewing, then you know that they're overlapping. This, I don't like this, so I'm not going to use it. I have extra. This, of course, is from the other version. I have extra pieces. This can be tossed aside and taken apart later if I want. So you're going to be making your 4-patch units. You're then going to make the section, and those 4-patch units, you can see, are going to come here in these corners. The next strip set you're going to make is this strip set. Okay, so you're going to make a strip set that looks, oops, moving things, like this. You're going to press, it tells you which way to press, either open or into the accent 2. You're going to make these, you're going to subcut this the same way you're going to be subcutting into these units. Okay, so after you do that, and this is my other my other strip set. I was getting a little worried when I first started doing this because that looks a little Christmassy to me, and that's not the intention. So you're going to cut these, and then you're going to now go to the pile that you cut of 2 by 6.5 inch background pieces. So you're going to take these, and we're sewing, as I said, we're sewing for the block 1, but also for the things that we're going to be using in the border unit. So each of these blocks only takes 4 of these units. You're going to be making more. You're going to put these together, right sides together, and you're going to sew one side, okay, on the length. It isn't going to matter if you sew here or here, because it's going to open up and it's going to end up being the same. But what I want to caution you about is don't be tempted to sew with the full rectangle facing up. You'll want to sew with the pieced unit up. And the reason for that, it's just like a teenager. You don't have any idea if you're sewing this way. You have no idea what those seam allowances are doing underneath. They're having a party and they're going to get flipped and it's going to be bulky. So when you sew like this, with this up, you can sew down here and you can control so that this does not get here. It's all about control. So you can see on this one, I've sewn it. I sewed this direction. You see that seam allowance? I should have used a different thread. So we've got the seam allowance here. Oh, I need some of those 4-patch units. Show you that. This in the instructions is going to make you question my sanity, if you don't already. When you press this, we want to press this way. We want to press up here. It's easier. It's going to be an easier, probably a flatter press, but I don't want you to do that. I actually want you to press going toward the pieced unit. Now, the reason for that is the next step that we have to do. We're going to be putting 4-patch units with it. We're going to be putting this next to the side of the center, and then the 4 patches. And then the 4 patches are going to, they're going to fit and nest together those seams. So this is where this glue or this solution, the Easy Press solution, really helps too. So that's kind of nice. You're going to get a nice flat section that looks like this, okay, when that's done. You're going to be making, for each block that you have to make of this, the short makes 1, the long makes 2. You're going to make 4 for each block because it's going all around here, and then it's also used in the border. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to sew it to the center. Okay, you see that? Sorry. You're going to sew it to the center, and you're going to press toward the center. Okay. See, when you throw that brown in there, it doesn't look so Christmassy, does it? So you can see where I've pressed going in, pressing open or in toward this. After this is done, what you're going to do is you're going to take this unit, and I'm sorry I'm swatching back and forth, just makes it a little easier. You're going to take this unit, and you're going to add 4 patches to the sides of it. Now, I'm going to show you something here. This is where, so it's going to look like this. Okay. Actually, it's going to come this way. This is where that, that pressing comes in play here. And I could have had you press or sew the 4 patch units, half one way, half another, the direction that you're sewing to make these work. But that was just a hassle. So when you go to put these together, you need to make sure that you're not putting them like this. You need to make sure that you're alternating. Check the picture in the book or in the pattern. It's very clear, I think. So what happens if you see here, this seam allowance is going this way, this one is going the opposite. I use that seam align glue. They're going to fit in there very beautifully. I'm going to sew that. It's going to fit here. When I go to sew the other one, the seam allowances are going the same direction. So what I do, I know that some people think there's a quilt police and that this is the wrong thing to do, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to show you what I do. Let me find the one here to make it fit. Here it is. You're going to take the one that needs to, and you're going to take your scissors. I know this kills a lot of people, but you're just going to put a little snip right here in the seam allowance. Don't hit into the seam allowance. If you hit into the seam allowance, you're going to have an open spot. You just snip right to that, and then you fold it the way that it needs to go. Here's what it's going to look like. Can you see this? This should have been folded this way. I just took that little snip there. Now it's the right way. Okay? And that's all. That's all. If you don't want to do that, press that seam open. That's going to work beautifully. After you do these two, you are going to, this is the reason I have a chest, right? You're going to put this, and this is going to go on the top and the bottom. Now, if I have done this incorrectly, or correctly, incorrectly, that's pretty bad. If I've done this correctly, look at the chain that happens. Let's do it this way. See the chain? If I've done this incorrectly, then these would have been here, okay? You see on the samples I did it correctly. Why do I point that out? because I have done it incorrectly. Okay. So what happened to me is I wasn't paying attention, and I put the browns together. It's a different block, not what I was going for. So this is what you're going to get. You're going to have one full block here and one full block here. Now, when you've got your blocks together, the last thing I do, those last two seams, this seam here and here, okay, I press those open. When I press those open, it just makes the whole thing flatter. Sorry about that. But if you don't want to, press whichever direction you want. It isn't going to matter when we're all done, because we're going to be adding some border units too. Again, the pressing, I don't fret so much about it, because there's always an easy fix for that. The double arrows in that final piece is the meaning that it's pressing open. So if you have any questions, post a comment on Facebook. I'll have it around, check it pretty frequently over the next couple days, get y'all caught up. I have the instructions already loaded up onto Facebook into the group, so that should be up and running. I'll get this up here pretty soon here, and as well as a little demo on the Seam-Align glue in the Easy Press solution. I'd love to see your pictures, so happy sewing. Thanks.